Welcome to Module 4, Identity and Security for Virtual Desktops. Everything in this module builds on one decision you make on day 1, what identity backs your session hosts. In this lesson we cover the 3 ways to join a session host, the rule Azure Virtual Desktop never breaks about identity discoverability, how to run FSLogix profiles on Azure Files without a domain controller using Microsoft Entra Kerberos, and how to turn on Microsoft Entra Single Sign-On for RDP. Azure Virtual Desktop supports 3 real join configurations. Microsoft Entra Joined is the cloud-first option with no domain controller required. Microsoft Entra Hybrid Joined preserves your existing Active Directory footprint. Microsoft Entra Domain Services Joined gives you a lightweight managed domain, but critically, it does not support Microsoft Entra Single Sign-On for RDP. And a session host joined only to standalone Active Directory, with no Microsoft Entra ID presence, is not a supported configuration at all. There is one rule that never bends: every user identity accessing Azure Virtual Desktop must be discoverable through Microsoft Entra ID. A standalone Active Directory deployment, even one federated with ADFS, is not supported if it never synchronizes into Microsoft Entra ID. If you're migrating a legacy remote desktop services estate that has never touched Entra ID, standing up Microsoft Entra Connect, or moving straight to cloud-only accounts, is where you start, not an optional cleanup step. Hybrid identity has a sharp edge that catches almost everyone eventually. Your on-premises account might be user at contoso.local while Microsoft Entra ID knows the same person as user at contoso.com. Azure Virtual Desktop only supports that mismatch if either the user principal name or the security identifier matches between the 2 directories. When neither matches, the classic symptom is that a user authenticates to the Azure Virtual Desktop service just fine but then fails to sign into the session host itself. Historically, FSLogix profiles on Azure Files needed a domain controller in the network path at every logon. Microsoft Entra Kerberos changes that. Microsoft Entra ID itself issues the Kerberos tickets needed to reach the file share over standard SMB, so hybrid joined or Entra joined session hosts don't need line of sight to a domain controller to load a profile. One constraint to remember: a storage account can only authenticate with one method at a time: Microsoft Entra ID, Active Directory, or Microsoft Entra Domain Services, never 2 together. The configuration runs in a defined order. First, enable Microsoft Entra Kerberos on the storage account, which creates its Entra ID app registration. Then assign share level and NTFS permissions for the profile folder. Next, grant admin consent to the new service principal and disable multi-factor authentication specifically on that service principal, because profile mounting happens silently at logon with no way to complete a step-up prompt. Finally, turn on the Cloud Kerberos ticket retrieval enabled setting on the session host through Intune Settings Catalog or Group Policy. 2 license tracks matter and people conflate them constantly. AVD access rights typically come bundled through Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, Business Premium, or Windows Enterprise E3 or E5, with standalone per-user licenses available otherwise. Separately, Microsoft Entra ID P1 or P2 is required for conditional access, dynamic groups, and multi-factor authentication enforcement. Never assume P1 is already included, verify it explicitly, because the access control lesson that follows this one depends entirely on it. Turning on single sign-on is 5 tasks. Enable Microsoft Entra authentication for RDP on the Windows Cloud Login application. Hide the consent prompt by targeting a dynamic device group of your session hosts. Create a Kerberos server object if your hosts are hybrid joined or need to reach on-premises resources. Review your conditional access policies, which we cover next lesson. And finally, enable single sign-on on the host pool itself, either through the portal or by setting Enabler SATF to 1 in PowerShell. Before you flip the switch, check the prerequisites. Session hosts must be Microsoft Entra joined or Microsoft Entra hybrid joined. They need Windows 11 or Windows 10 Enterprise, single or multi-session, with the October 2022 cumulative update or later, or Windows Server 2022 with its equivalent update. Hosts joined only to Microsoft Entra Domain Services or only to standalone Active Directory are excluded from this feature no matter what update level they're running. Everything you decide in this lesson ripples forward. Enabling single sign-on introduces a second Microsoft Entra sign-in event, one at the service and one at the session host, and that second event is exactly what the next lesson's conditional access policies need to target correctly. From there we move to role-based access control and conditional access app targeting, then to Intune and Defender for endpoint hardening on the session hosts themselves.